tales of horror that will give you the creeps.
This is going to be extremely painful, Mr. Verrill.
The most fun you'll ever have being scared. CREEPSHOW, rated R.
Now playing at a theater near you.
Welcome to the Cinematic Void Podcast. Cinematic Void is a cult film series that hosts screenings in the Los Angeles area as well as virtually. I am your host, Jim Branscombe, and joining me as always is...
What's up, y'all? Nick Vance, Paranoid Futures on all the social media platforms. You can find us online at cinematicvoid.com as well as Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, YouTube, SoundCloud, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Stitcher, and now Amazon or anywhere else in the world that you can get your podcasts.
Yeah. And if you like this podcast and you like other things that Cinematic Void does, such as the Cinemadness movie, you should consider joining our Patreon. By joining Patreon, it makes the podcast as well as the Cinemadness movie possible.
All right, man. So what are we getting into today?
I'd be remiss if I didn't say we were recording this in my car at the drive-in during Beyond Fest. But, so if you're wondering why this sounds a little different than the other ones, it's a car podcast. Normally you listen to a podcast in your car. You don't actually record them. So we're breaking new ground here, I think. But anyway, this is part 4 of our On Halloween series. This is the last installment. I hope you've enjoyed the previous 3 installments. And for this one, we're talking about anthology films and found footage, aka 2 subgenres that I don't really like, but in the case of On Halloween films, I kind of like these genres, and we're going to talk about a few of the films. I guess we'll just go ahead and jump right into it. We're going to do anthologies first, and this first film we're going to talk about is kind of the perennial Saturday afternoon horror movie that used to be on TV all the time. That's how I first saw it. It is from 1982. It's written by some guy you may have heard of called Stephen King. Wrote some books like It, The Stand, Carrie, The Shining, things like that. I'm sure you maybe have heard of them. It was directed by some other guy you may have heard of called George A. Romero, who, made a little movie called Night of the Living Dead and Dawn of the Dead and Martin and Night Riders. And it features special effects by one of the great special effects artists that ever did it, Mr. Tom Savini. And of course, I'm talking about CREEPSHOW. And I'll say this first. Outside the wraparound, the opening and the closing, CREEPSHOW doesn't really have fuck all to do with Halloween.
Yeah.
I mean, there is a pumpkin in a window, so that's going on.
It makes it enough for us to talk about it today.
Yeah. I mean, I guess it fits. And, it's 5 different stories in this anthology, and it's modeled after, Tales from the Crypt, Vault of Horror, like EC comic style, which is interesting because in the 70s there were adaptations before the HBO Tales from the Crypt that Amicus did of Tales from the Crypt and Vault of Horror. So this is kind of throwback to that kind of stuff. Like I said, the only thing this has to do with Halloween is the opening, which has Tom Atkins, a mustache-less Tom Atkins, and it features Joe Hill, who is Stephen King's son, who plays Tom Atkins' son in the movie, who is reading the CREEPSHOW comic. Tom doesn't like it and slaps the shit out of him.
But he grew up to write the Lock and Key comic, which is really great, so
yeah,
he learned nothing.
He learned nothing. Just Tom Atkins slapped him, made him a good writer. Probably didn't get any of that writing ability from his dad, I would think. But
Nah, just a slap.
Just a slap. But, yeah, I guess real quickly, since this doesn't really have much to do with Halloween outside of a jack-o'-lantern in a window, we'll just kind of run through the pieces of the anthology. The first one has to do with a different holiday, which is Father's Day, which has a great zombie. Also features a fantastically awkward dance by Ed Harris, where he kind of gyrates around and shit.
Matthew McConaughey based his entire fucking acting career on that one Ed Harris dancing scene. Tell me I'm wrong.
You're not wrong. So, wow. I now see it.
Yeah.
From Dazed and Confused to fucking True Detective.
Man. Yep.
Oh my god. Literally, it's just that weird fucking dance Ed Harris does is essentially Matthew McConaughey.
Every commercial, every film, it's that fucking dance.
All right.
All right. Right on.
Yeah. And then, it's a fun segment. The next segment is The Lonesome Death of Jordy Verrill, which stars Stephen King. And basically a meteor falls in his backyard and he starts growing moss all over himself until he pulls a 187 and shoots himself.
Kind of a precursor to Joe Dirt.
I don't recall a mulleted David Spade blowing his fucking face off with a shotgun.
That was the ending that they cut. It was just too dark for Hollywood, man. But...
and moving on from that is Something That Tied You Over, which is the second appearance of a zombie. This one of the aquatic persuasion. This segment has Galen Ross, who was in Dawn of the Dead, has Ted Danson, and it has Leslie Nielsen.
Mr. Let Her Rip himself.
Let Her Rip. And it's pretty good. I like this one. And then probably the best, and I guess it could be argued, but probably the best segment in this anthology is the Crate, which has Hal Halbrook, Fritz Weaver, and Adrienne Barbeau, about the giant, mysterious, like, ape monster creature that's in a crate that will fucking devour you if you get near it. And then the anthology closes out with They're Creeping Up on You, which has E.G. Marshall, who's very bug phobic. He lives in an apartment that's overrun by roaches, and, well, the roaches get him. Or it's just any rent control building in L.A.
Yeah, I'm not sure if this or Fulci's Maggots freak me out more, but man, this one really got to me as well. It's just too much.
As we're talking about each individual section of this movie, I think all the sections are really, really good. But my big beef I've had with CREEPSHOW, and I know this is going to be blasphemous, is that it always feels too long.
It feels like it was planned to be a whole season of television, and then they were just like, nah, sorry, bud. Maybe, and then they just pieced together as a movie and said, fuck it.
I mean, eventually what came out of CREEPSHOW was Tales from the Dark Side, which, you know, there was a CREEPSHOW 2 and then Tales from Dark Side. The movie was supposed to be CREEPSHOW 3, or intended to be CREEPSHOW 3 originally.
Which Joe Hill just wrote some new Tales from Dark Side comic books, by the way.
Oh, shit.
So there you go, full circle.
Full circle, full slap. But, yeah, I remember watching this as a kid, and, like, you know, when I think of each part, I think each part is fine, but, like, trying to watch them all back to back is just... It's kind of hard.
It's tedious, man.
I'm not saying the movie's bad, you know, because I'm sure after my, like, trashing of Day of the Dead on previous podcasts makes you think, you don't like Romero. I love Romero. Dawn of the Dead is one of my favorites. Martin is one of my favorites. I love The Crazies. I love Season of the Witch. I even love Night Riders. But CREEPSHOW just, it's a good movie that just feels too long. But it's also kind of that perfect Saturday afternoon horror movie you would catch, like, you know, just on regular TV or whatever. I mean, it you know, it kind of plays into TV anyway, because, like, you know, the commercial breaks give you a chance to breathe. But, like, watching it in a theater, and I've watched this movie probably like 20 times in my life now. You know, sometimes sitting down like, okay, is this going to be the time that I really connect with CREEPSHOW and I love it like everyone else? And I always feel the same. It's just like, that's good. But, yeah.
Come for Leslie Nielsen and Ted Danson, stay for the cockroaches.
I mean, I'm sure that was their intent, but I don't know. So, we're going to move on from CREEPSHOW to an anthology that is basically all in balls deep on Halloween. It's from 2015, and it's Tales of Halloween. And it kind of kicks off with a familiar face that you saw in CREEPSHOW, and it's Adrienne Barbeau again. And she's kind of reprising her role from The Fog as a radio DJ, kind of like setting up the premise of Tales of Halloween, which is 10 different vignettes, or, you know, parts of an anthology film, each directed by a different filmmaker. And I watched it when it originally came out, and I don't know, it's like I wanted to like it, but it just felt too fucking long. You know, I think everyone who made the movie, their heart and their love of Halloween was in the right place, but it was just like, it was just too many things, and, like, the nature of, like, having mixed filmmaker anthologies, you get kind of uneven results. So I'm just going to kind of run through, and if you got an opinion on anything, just kind of jump in, Nick. So we'll start with Sweet Tooth, which is directed by Dave Parker, and it's about a monster that takes revenge on, you know, some grown-ups or older kids that steal candy from this little kid and disembowels them and fucks them up badly. It's kind of fun. It's also the first of, I think, maybe it's two, maybe as many three of these sections of this anthology that uses public domain Night of the Living Dead footage in it. Mm-hmm. And I think it's good. I don't think, you know, it's nothing like I wasn't blown away, but I was just like, it's decent. The next one is The Night Billy Raised Hell by Darren Lynn Bossman, who directed a bunch of the Saw sequels, as long as like Repo, the Genetic Opera, and some other like kind of musically horror, Rocky Horror-esque things like that. This one stars Barry Bostwick, and it's kind of a play on Jeff Lieberman's Satan's Little Helper in a way.
This one's fun. I thought this one was cool, and actually now I need to go back and watch Satan's Little Helper. Now that you kind of say they're similar, just a good little time watching that guy run around and fuck people up.
Yeah. I mean, it's
a nice little twist.
It's a nice little twist. Plus, you can tell Barry Bostwick's just fucking having fun chewing up that scenery. The third one is directed by Adam Gersrich. It's called Trick. It's about some kids that take revenge on a group of scummy adults who tortured one of their friends and took photos of it. It has Trent Haga in it, who was in a bunch of he was a bunch of like late 90s trauma stuff, and he also made a movie called 68 Kill, which is pretty cool if you haven't checked that out. This segment's kind of nasty and kind of violent. I think it's decent. I don't think it's like one of the best things I've ever seen. I don't think it's the worst thing. I think it's a little better than middle of the road, so let's just say above average. So the following trick is the segment called The Weak and the Wicked. It's directed by Paul Slett, and it's about some bullies that get served by a demon, and majority takes place outside, kind of in an alley area.
Keir Gilchrist, that was in It Follows, is in this, who's also in a bunch of like metal and hardcore bands around town. Shout out Keir.
See, it always comes back to punk and hardcore, no matter how we try not to bring it. I'm sure Black Flag... I just said it, so yep, back to the Black Flag podcast. I mean, I kind of intentionally did that, but whatever. The fifth segment in this is called The Grim Grinning Ghost. It's by Axel Caroline. Stars Alex Esso, who was in Starry Eyes, and Lynn Shay's also in it, and there's cameos by filmmakers Stuart Gordon and Mick Garris. And this might be my favorite segment out of the whole anthology. I think it's really creepy. It's about a ghost who takes the eyes of anyone who stares at it, and it kind of starts out as like a Halloween tale, and then like obviously comes to be a reality thing. I think it's really well done. Like I said, it's my favorite. I think it's genuinely creepy. And it doesn't feel like the others, where I feel like some of these segments feel like it's trying too hard to be like, this is a Halloween anthology type thing. And this one, I think, nails the spirit of Halloween. Moving on to the sixth installment of this anthology is Ding Dong by Lucky McKee, who also made another Halloween movie that we were originally going to talk about, but I couldn't figure out how to fit it in, which is May, which is really, really great. If you've never seen May, definitely check it out. We'll probably... If we do on Halloween next year on the podcast, we'll probably talk about that one. This segment is kind of a twist on Hansel and Gretel, kind of a witch, eating kids kind of vibe. It's kind of okay. I wasn't really my favorite. I can actually, going back and reading about it, I was like, I don't really remember this one. And, I'm not trying to be disparaging or whatever. It's just like, I just don't really remember this one. When reading the description kind of remind me of it, but like thinking back in my mind after rewatching it last week, like I somehow already forgot it. The next one, which is This Means War, is by Andrew Karsh and John Skip. It features Dana Gould, who's battling his like heavy metal bro-ish neighbor on Halloween that ends in a big fist fight where they both die in a horrible way. It's kind of silly, a little bit gory. It's okay. The next one, which is probably my second favorite installment in this, is by Mike Mendez. It's Friday the 31st. It features a Jason-esque killer who smashes a little alien who came to planet Earth to go trick-or-treating, and then the alien turns into this goo and possesses one of the dead bodies of one of the victims of this killer, and then starts chasing after the killer. So it's kind of a twist on the slasher thing, where the slasher is actually gets hunted by this like alien-possessed body. It's really cool. I really like this one. Number 9 in this anthology is The Ransom of Rusty Rex, which is directed by Ryan Schifflin, who I believe is Lalo Schiflin's son, maybe? Because I noticed Lalo Schiflin did the main theme to this movie, so I'm assuming that's the connection there. And it's about a group of kidnappers who grab a millionaire's son. Millionaire is played by John Landis. And they kidnap his son, who ends up being some kind of weird vampire, so their kidnapping plot goes south pretty quickly.
Much unlike John Landis' actual son. Who's not a vampire, but maybe worse.
He's definitely a predator.
Right.
If you could simply stake him in the heart, I think a lot of people will be happy to see him turn to dust. All right, anyway. And funny enough, as we're at the drive-in, and the second movie that's going to be playing tonight is actually directed by Neil Marshall. He directed the last segment of Tales of Halloween, which is The Bad Seed, which is about a bunch of killer pumpkins that eat people, which is kind of cool. Again, nothing spectacular, nothing like earth-shattering. It's just okay, which is kind of my feeling of this whole anthology. I think there's like some really good, cool segments, and then there's other ones that are just like in the middle, and then there's a few that are just below average. I'm not saying any of them are outright terrible, but you would think for like a 10 short film anthology is what this essentially is. Like it'd be a little more memorable, and it's just okay. And maybe because anthologies just aren't my genre, so to speak, but it just didn't grab me. Like I said, I watched it when it originally came out. I watched it again just to prep for this, because honestly, the only two I actually remember was the Grim Grinning Ghost and Friday the 31st. And the rest of them, like, actually that's not true. I remember the Sweet Tooth one because it was the one that started off. And then once I saw The Night Billy Raised Hell again, and remember Barry Bostwick in it, like, I kind of remember that one. But like the rest of them, just like, I don't remember this. Like they could easily just like switched out filmmakers, put different ones in like 5 years later now, and I wouldn't know the difference. If you like horror anthologies and you like the spirit of Halloween, it might be for you. It's not necessarily for me. I don't know if it's for you either.
Yeah, I don't know. It's a way to check out a bunch of directors I haven't heard of, and cool little Halloween stories.
So we're going to wrap up our section on Halloween anthology films, and this one is actually one of your favorite films, period, right?
It absolutely is, man. And it's this is one where it's like it's an anthology film, but it's kind of not. It's just so wonderfully pieced together that it kind of makes you forget that you're watching a bunch of different stories. Anyway, let's get into it, man. 2007's Trick or Treat by Michael Dougherty, who also did the Krampus movie, which is one of my favorite Christmas holiday movies. That thing's fun, man. When you're reaching for, there's not a whole lot of good Christmas horror movies, really. Like, aside from the Black Christmas and a couple of the staples there, Christmas holiday doesn't really leave you with much,
I mean, it is funny because probably outside of Halloween, Christmas... Actually, I think Christmas might have more Halloween...
It kind of does, yeah. It does
actually,
have more...
I was going to say, Christmas actually has more, like, horror movies set on Halloween than Halloween does at this point.
Yeah, man.
But
Stone Cold Steve Austin.
No, it was Goldberg.
Oh, it was Goldberg. Holy shit.
Santa's sleigh, man.
Yes. All right, man. So anyway, Trick or Treat. Small town celebrates Halloween in the shadow of the town's dark past. Bad kids smash pumpkins and steal candy. Mean kids play pranks. Homicidal principal terrorizes the town. Horny women turn into werewolves. The dead come back to life, and a lot of living people die. Chaos reigns as lives intertwine, and our boy Sam, the cute little pumpkin-headed scarecrow guy, always happens to be around when the shit's going down. I don't know, it's a fun tongue-in-cheek morality tale. It just kind of weaves and zigs and zags, and it just comes back together, and it's fucking great, man. And it's a lot like those EC comics, just like Creepshow or something like that. It has that kind of, it beats it in, it beats into your head that it's a comic book movie. I mean, it kind of shows the pages and such. But yeah, I don't know. Should we get into each segment in particular?
Yeah. I mean, like I said, I'm not big on anthologies because I feel like they're just kind of too inconsistent. But like Creepshow, this is one director, but like what this does is that the wraparound in each segment, as you already hit upon, they all tie back together. So it's an anthology, but you could also look at something like maybe like Pulp Fiction or
it shows you characters that aren't always connected, but it kind of shows you the same thing happening from their point of view. I will say I think it kind of maybe suffered due to its name. Like, how many movies are just called some variation of Trick or Treat?
So the movie starts out with the opening, which ends up, like I said, the thing I love about this, it all pays off and it all like meshes together and it's all connected, even when you don't really think it. It's a really nice payoff. So the opening starts with, I guess it's the end of Halloween night, and there's some guy and his wife, and the guy's like wanting to knock boots with his wife, wants to put on a porn, whatever, get her in the mood or get himself the mood. Not sure what he's doing. So she goes outside to go clean up the Halloween stuff, and she blows out a jack-o'-lantern and gets aced.
But she hates Halloween, and that's why she's out there cleaning up all those decorations. So she kind of gets what she deserves, as far as I'm concerned.
Yeah, pretty much. That's just desserts.
So and the next segment is the principal of the school that all the kids in the town go to. So everybody knows him. But he's a creepy guy, and he's the creepy guy from Happiness, Dylan.
It's Dylan Baker.
Dylan Baker. Yeah, he just plays the perfect creepy, like, you know, middle-aged guy that's just, maybe he shouldn't be around kids, but he's the principal.
Maybe between this and Happiness, he shouldn't be anywhere near a fucking child, man.
Nowhere near it, man. You know, he's catching some of the kids around town stealing candy and doing other stuff, and he makes them pay.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting how it works, because, like, he comes in later for the surprise party, right?
Mm-hmm.
The second segment, which might be my favorite just because how fucking creepy it is the Halloween school bus massacre, which is about, you know, a bus that, basically a bus driver, like, intentionally, because the town's parents paid him to cause an accident with all these, like, mentally challenged kids on the bus. And then these kids are now zombies that come out of Creep, and, like, a bunch of other kids, like, go, like, to do some fucking, like, basically fuck around, do some Halloween pranks around where they had died, and guess what? Shit's real. And the kid they were bullying, because they bullied her, she's like, nah, you can get fucking mauled by these fucking, like, nasty, evil...
Undead.
Yeah. Undead school kids.
Vengeful. They're just getting their revenge. They're not evil.
Yeah, they're not. Yeah, they're vengeful. And you fuck with them, they're gonna fuck you up back, man. That's just, again, morality tale.
I mean, they drove a bus into a rock quarry. It's awful.
So we kind of talked about this one because it ties almost directly into the principal one, which is the surprise party, which is about a bunch of, like, I guess college-age girls looking to, like, have some Halloween fun. And turns out their kind of fun is because they're fucking werewolves.
They're going around, and it seems like they're kind of picking up guys. Hey, come to this party. Hey, come to this party. Everybody's like, hell yeah, I'm coming to this party. And one of those guys happens to be the principal, who said who told his son he was going out on a date. It turns out he's going around town dressed up, disguised, being super creepy, killing women.
The creepy child murderer guy with, I guess he has metal fangs or something in it.
Yeah.
Because he's like biting people in the neck, like pretending to be a vampire. And then he gets more than he bit off more than you can chew with a group of werewolves. And I guess my only flaw with this movie is the use of a Marilyn Manson song.
Oh yeah, like over and over. It's one of those. Right, it plays like multiple times throughout the movie, right? Or maybe I just heard it the one and I was like, oh god.
And, you know, Mike Doherty, just put Christian Death in next time. Just do a director's cut, take out Marilyn Manson, put Christian Death or just any other guy.
It's probably cheaper to license.
Yeah, it's just, and you'll feel better about it.
But one of the really the main woman that turns into a werewolf is I'm spacing on her name, but
Anna
from
Paquin.
True Blood, yeah. So Anna Paquin, and this is kind of right around that time too, right? So she was doing the werewolf and the vampire thing, kind of simultaneously here.
Playing for both teams.
That's right.
And then the next segment has Brian Cox, who I don't care. You can at me all you want.
Spoiler alert. Is that what you're going for?
No,
okay.
I'm just saying, like, best Hannibal Lecter, Manhunter, Brian Cox.
Mm-hmm.
You can at me all you want, but, like, yeah, Brian Cox rules as Hannibal Lecter. Anthony Hopkins, he's fine,
but it turns out that you know, this town's living in with their dark secret of, you know, they drove the bus into the rock quarry, and, you know, hiding the kids that they were ashamed of in the town back in the day. Well, the town's been living with this deep, dark secret, and you find out who the culprit is here. But, you know, all this shit's happening because violence begets violence.
Are you doing Earth Crisis lyrics?
Yeah. And it's a firestorm to purify, man. I mean, they did this terrible shit way back in the day, and the whole fucking town's gonna pay for it now.
Street by street, block by block.
That's right. Take it all back.
Sam is gonna fuck you up. But, alright, so we're going to take a quick commercial break. When we return, we're going to talk about found footage that takes place on Halloween on the Cinematic Void podcast.
Ah, yes, Angoulême. I've always had a weakness for the royal bloodline.
He is the king of his kind.
Jack the Ripper. They never did discover his true identity, did they? And for 500 years, he has stalked the living. Would you care to join me for a little bite after the interview? Martin Landau is the terrifying, the erotic, the original Dracula. Just my type. Oh, positive.
Unbearable suspense that keeps you on the edge of an abyss of terror.
Take a cult film odyssey into Cinemadness with Cinematic Void. Based in Los Angeles, Cinematic Void is a film series that specializes in horror and exploitation films. Currently, we are hosting Cinematic Void Up All Night in the Cinemadness movie, a monthly virtual screening series, as well as the Cinematic Void podcast, where we dive deeper into the world of cult cinema. You can find Cinematic Void on the World Wide Web at cinematicvoid.com, as well as Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. And if you like what we do, you can support Cinematic Void by joining our Patreon. Until next time, see you in the Void. We're talking about movies that take place on Halloween on the Cinematic Void podcast. In the previous section, we talked about anthology films. Now we're switching gears and we're talking about found footage. Now, Nick, are you a found footage fan?
No. Is anybody?
I think there's a segment of the population that really loves those movies. I mean, how else would there be like 18 Paranormal Activities or whatever it is?
Because, well, that's true. Well, those movies and Blair Witch did well. So now a bunch of motherfuckers think they can just make a million movies with zero budget. And we're here to tell you can't. No, I'm just kidding. But
actually, we are. But now, I'm not saying this is the first one, because there's obviously movies that played around with the reality. Is this real? Is this not? And I'm not sure how much of this is really a Halloween movie. I know it does take place in October. And we're just going to kind of touch upon it because, like, I'm not sure it's really a Halloween movie, but this is talking found footage horror, and I think, and it has to do with her home state, essentially, Maryland. It's none other than 1999's The Blair Witch Project. The reason why I like talking about it is, like, this was one of those movies that had a really, really great marketing campaign, which, you know, might have oversold the film. And I actually think it did when the film went wide release, but
it's a different world, man. We were living in a different world at the time where the internet was pretty damn new, and we didn't have a lot of access to information. A lot of when you hear about new movie or music, a lot of it is hearsay. You could argue that it kind of made things more exciting back then when everything was a little more vague.
Yeah. And I mean, yeah, because Blair Witch built itself up on the internet, when you had to, like, get those, like, 50 hours of free AOL, like, discs, so you could actually go on the internet. And I mean, I can't even remember what was on the fucking internet back then.
just that dial-up sound and AOL chat rooms.
Yeah.
That was the extent of the internet for me.
And you could build a website with geosites or Angel Fire or something. But I mean, the thing I like about Blair Witch is that I think it uses multiple formats, you know, 60 millimeter video, and it assembles it and puts it together well, and it's damn scary. And I remember you, me, and I forget who else went. There's like 4 or 5 of us went to the art house theater down in Baltimore, the Charles at the time.
Mike Thompson, Ozzy.
Yeah, a bunch of people that you don't know.
Shout out.
Shout out. I know they don't listen to the podcast, so shout out's a little point.
Fuck y'all.
Fuck y'all. You ain't gonna hear it. Suck our fucking asses. Okay. But anyway, remember a bunch of us went and saw the Charles before it had its wide release, when it was still, like, working the art house circuit. And I remember when we got to the end of the movie, just standing in that corner, it was the fucking scariest, creepiest thing, because you didn't know what the fuck happened. And I remember we left, we were all fucking shook, like, terrified. And we were like 19 at the time, and, like, this movie fucked us up. So much so that for the next, like, maybe, I'd say next month maybe, we started, like, fucking with each other doing Blair Witch pranks. Do you remember this? I remember we used to build those fucking Blair Witch stick figures, and we used to leave them on, you know, front porches, on people's car windshields. I know we used to, like, go up late at night and, like,
imagine a time in the world where the Blair Witch, like, pieces of sticks like stuck together is scary.
I remember, like, knocking on people's windows at, like, 3 in the morning, and they wake up and see a fucking Blair Witch stick hanging out. The good old days. I mean, it could come back. It's, you know, it's a social distancing game. But yeah, I like the Blair Witch, and I was actually hoping at some point this year I was working on doing a Camp Void this year, and one of the things I was going to do Blair Witch and the Legend of Boggy Creek together.
Nice.
So it'd be like the original pseudo found footage Bigfoot movie with the pseudo killer witch monster thing in the woods. One last thing before we move on from the Blair Witch Project. I also remember that we drove out to Burkittsville where they shot it, and it's like basically it was a abandoned military base out there, and it's just like empty buildings and just no lights and scary trees. I remember driving down the road where like I don't know if it was anywhere near like any of the locations, but I just remember just being creeped out because like every time like you turn when there's an opening in the woods, you see a deer standing there just looking at you, and it's just like, oh fuck, please don't jump out in front of us.
I don't know if you've ever been the type of guy to run around in abandoned buildings, abandoned mental hospitals, and things like
This.
like this, you know. But that kind of thing, which is also just something that doesn't really seem to exist anymore, or like, you know, you just get picked up for trespassing or whatever. But
or you get picked up for your own paranormal show. So
yeah, there you go. But that also just makes this much creepier because, like, I know as the juvenile delinquent that I was, you know, always running around in abandoned places and just being in places where I shouldn't have been in general. So to add this and make it like those kind of that kind of fun that much scarier too. I don't know, just different time, man.
Adrenaline junkie, man. I'm
Yeah.
surprised you didn't go bungee jumping.
Yeah, I'm afraid of heights.
So Blair Witch takes place in October, but this next found footage movie actually leads up to Halloween, and it's fairly recent, and it was like a movie that I saw on Amazon Prime. I was like, I wonder what this is. It's like, I don't know. I don't really like found footage. And I watched it with my wife, and holy shit, I was fucking blown away. And I'm talking about 2015's Hell House LLC, directed by Steve Conetti. And if you hadn't seen it, here's the little plot. 5 years after an unexplained malfunction causes the death of 15 tour goers and staff on the opening night of a Halloween haunted house tour, aka Hell House, a documentary film crew visits the scene of the tragedy to investigate what really happened that night in the town called Abaddon. Now, this movie, it gets under your skin because, like, you know, it starts off by, it shows you, like, it mixes in like YouTube footage of like people going through the haunted house, news broadcasts, like, you know, documentary interviews, that kind of stuff. It mixes stuff, and then it mixes the footage of them, the people that were setting up this haunted house. They were documenting everything, and dude, it's fucking creepy. There's genuinely things that like I think about, and it's just like I can't go to sleep at night. And I don't know, man. It's just I was really, really pleasantly surprised. Like, and I can't overstate how much it was like, holy shit, this is amazing. It's really creepy. It's really well done. And like I said, there's things that, like, if I just think about long enough, I'll think this shit is real. Like, there's some fucking weird clown mannequin things they have in the basement that, like, slightly move. And, like, they don't do much, but, like, when they change position, it's fucking creepy because you're like, that shit moved. That shit looks creepy. Get it the fuck away from me. Why are you standing next to this motherfucker? I actually rewatched it 2 days ago, like, as I was going to bed, and I was like, man, this is a fucking terrible idea. Like, I freaked myself out and, like, stayed up to, like, 6 in the morning waiting for the sun to come out because I was afraid of, like... There's a bit in there where there's, like, a kind of demonic girl that kind of looks like Reagan from The Exorcist, and, like, there's this dude that... Here's the other thing that's fucked up, and, like, I would have quit this fucking, like, haunted house crew if I had to do this. They're staying at the haunted house that they're working at to make the haunted house. There's this one dude that's in his bedroom, and all of a sudden he sees this creepy girl that looks like Reagan from fucking The Exorcist, and she's coming closer, and he covers his face, and he pulls it down, she's closer. Covers his face, pulls it down closer, and then finally she's right in his fucking face. It is fucking horrifying.
Awesome.
Like, you know, it's a mix of, like, what you see and what you don't see, but the stuff you end up seeing, it gets to you. There's a little cool kind of eerie piano thing that kind of plays throughout too that's really good. And, you know, I think this is one of the best horror movies that I've seen that came out in the last decade of 2011 through this 2020 here. Like, highest possible recommendation. Cool. I know there's 2 sequels to Hell House, and I think they're both exclusively on Shudder, if I'm not mistaken. And both the sequels are good. I wouldn't say they're as great as the first one. They kind of expand the mythos of why this particular house is the way it is and why like people are drawn to it and they get trapped in there and the hauntings and this kind of stuff. And they're interesting. I mean, the first one I would say is a goddamn masterpiece. So if you haven't checked out Hell House LLC, definitely put it on your list to watch this Halloween. The sequels, I think they're decent. I think they have really creepy moments, but like, you know, it's one of those things where like you made a Stone Cold classic. I understand that like, you know, got to make money. You're getting offered deals to make more. Go for it.
He's made his life's work to just make Hell House movies.
Well, apparently he's also doing, like, the guy who made this is making a Hell House LLC themed TV show that's coming
sick.
soon.
Okay.
And I'm actually really interested in seeing, like, I kind of sound like I'm shitting on the sequels. I'm not. I think they're good, but I think this one is just like, it's next level, and it's genuinely fucking creepy. God damn it. I'm fucking scared sitting in the car with you. I'm afraid one of these goddamn clowns is in the back seat.
Hey, Jim, do you want to see something really scary?
What's that?
I don't know, I'm just doing the Twilight Zone thing.
Oh. Fucking eyes are going to pop out of your head. Yeah, you know, which also reminds me of the scariest thing I saw as a kid, which was Pee-wee's Big Adventure in Large Marge. But we're getting a little off track. So for this next found footage movie, it's a movie that came out the year before of Hell House LLC, and it's directed by Bobby Rowe. It's called The House That October Built, and you know, this was another pleasant surprise. I sing the praises of Hell House LLC, and I think it's a masterpiece. I think this is a solid found footage movie. So, for those of you who haven't seen it, here's the plot. Beneath the fake blood and cheap mask of countless haunted house attractions across the country, there are whispers of a truly terrifying alternatives. Looking to find an authentic, blood-curdling good fright for Halloween, 5 friends set off on a road trip in an RV to track down these underground haunts. Just when their search seems to reach a dead end, strange and disturbing things start happening, and it becomes clear that the haunt has come to them. So yeah, it's about a bunch of friends kind of documenting what they're going to different haunted houses, trying to look for the ultimate, like, scare, you know? And, you know, it's well done because, like, the acting's really good. You can tell it feels like these people were friends. And then slowly and subtly, you can start seeing, like, they're starting to get, like, tracked down by, like, what looks like different, like, haunted house performers. They're staying in character. And it gets really creepy, unnerving, especially when they get to the point where, like, they're like, all right, we're going to take you to the ultimate haunt. And, like, it's pretty unnerving. I don't have nightmares of it like Hell House LLC, but I think I think this movie's really well done. Really well done use of found footage, which it doesn't really cheat, which I think is one of the problems with a lot of found footage. It's like, oh, we're going to do this lo-fi format, and then we're going to cheat for the conceit. And this movie doesn't do that.
Anyone that works at those haunted house attractions, you're sick. There's something wrong with you. Stop touching me.
Yeah,
don't jump out at me. Leave me alone.
Yeah, I occasionally like to go in there, but like, every haunted.
They're fun. We went to Universal last year. It was a good time.
It was, but Universal's a little controlled. But some of those like bootleg backwoods ones were like.
It's just juggalos. It's just juggalos jumping out at you.
Fucking like Hatchet Man coming for you, whatever. Some of the backwoods, I don't want to say backwoods, but some of the like more like low budget, like regional ones, like, you and I grew up on the East Coast, and like I remember driving up to like somewhere like middle of nowhere, Pennsylvania, and going to one. It was like a haunted hayride, and like it was really good. And there's actually one near where I grew up called Legends of the Fog, which was pretty cool too. But like there's always one or two overzealous motherfuckers there that like they live for this because they're fucking psychopaths, but they haven't crossed the line into like really doing home invasions and terrifying people. So they just save it up for
practice run.
Yeah, it's practice one. They basically save up and get off. I mean, get out and probably get off on.
Yeah, a little get off.
They'll get off. I don't want to disparage haunted house workers. I'm sure people just like have fun and scare people. But
juggalos are great people.
I'm all for their gathering, and I think the FBI is unfairly like marginalized them. They are not a criminal gang. They're just some people that like to wear some clown makeup, drink some Faygo, and work at haunted house attractions. But we have one last found footage movie we're going to talk about. But before we get to it, we're actually going to take a commercial break, and when we return, we're going to have some special surprise guests on the Cinematic Void podcast.
What will terrify you most at the Haunted Mansion in Long Branch, New Jersey? The Haunted Mansion, home of more than 30 creatures of the night. Frightening, monstrous, blood-chilling creatures of every description. Which one will make you scream in terror? Find out at the Haunted Mansion in Long Branch, New Jersey.
Welcome back. We are talking about films that take place on Halloween, specifically found footage films on the Cinematic Void podcast. And joining me now is two very special guests. We're going to be talking about a film that I guess you could say came out in 1987, but in reality it came out in 2013, but it looks like it came out in 1987, which is the genius of this film. So please welcome the creators of the WNUF Halloween Special, Jimmy George and Chris LaMartina. How you guys doing?
Dude, doing great. Thanks for having us.
Good. Thank you so much.
So, I mean, I'm a little biased about this movie, but I do love it quite a bit. And we'll get into why I might be a little more biased than some of the other things. But now you guys have been working together before WNUF for how many years?
Before WNUF, probably
2006 is when we started hanging out. Yeah. So, yeah, 7 years.
So how did this project come about? Because it's a little different than what you guys have been doing previously.
Well, it's funny. I mean, like, basically the short story of a very long story was we'd been making about a movie a year every year since 2006, give or take some years. But we were coming up on like the second summer we weren't going to have made a feature. And we were really sort of bummed out about it. And I talked to Jimmy. I was like, dude, the only way we're making a movie this summer is if we make a found footage movie. The only way we do this is we make something fast. So basically, but the problem was we were never really too big of fans of found footage. Like, I love Blair Witch Project. And like, I'd actually worked on Lovely Molly, Ed Sanchez's film. Basically, it was this sort of weird allegory between demonic possession and heroin addiction. But like, I didn't... I basically just wasn't sure necessarily how we were going to approach the found footage genre. And then we sort of sat down and came up with a list of all the things we hated about the found footage genre, and then sort of reverse engineered what those solutions could be and how that would turn into like the Midnight Crew version of what found footage would be.
Right.
I guess I don't know how many tenets there were, but there were probably 3 or 4. Like, the big one was like, why are people filming this? Like, what's the point of it? You know, I hated the fact that like it was a single location. It was so monotonous for a lot of found footage movies. Like, how do you actually break up the monotony?
Yeah.
And then, let's do the 3 big ones because we could talk all day about this. But like the third big one was like, when you get a movie at a video store with the UPC code, you immediately know, or Best Buy or wherever, if it has a UPC code, you immediately know it's not found footage and the conceit of the story is broken. So to work that out, it was sort of like, all right, number one, why are they filming this when shit's starting to get crazy? Well, maybe they have to film this because it's a TV broadcast. And if they don't film it, it's ad revenue and they lose their jobs. The second thing was what was the second thing? Oh my God. Oh, the idea of monotony. It's like one location. It's like there's no break. It just takes long forever. And then like, so I think this sort of what I really think is the thing that sets us apart from a lot of movies like WNUF is the commercial breaks. Like when we realized we were going to make 20-30 minutes of fake commercials, like there was sort of this moment where like, are we really going to do this? Like, is anyone like that's probably a bad idea, but that's what we loved about it, right? It was like, no, this is fucking stupid. Like, no one is stupid enough to do this, and we were that fucking stupid. And
it's funny. I've heard the movie described as an endurance test many times, and we discussed that. Like, well, shit. Like, people are gonna lose their patience. And it's funny, there's times where we've been in screenings and I've seen people like get up to pee during the commercial break just like they would at home. Like, and I'm like, that's awesome. Like, it's working.
Well, it's funny too. I literally, this is fresh in my mind because literally 2 hours ago, I got a message from this fucking prick kid who wrote me a message literally saying that he watched it on Shudder and it was terrible. And like, it was so stupid and dumb. And like, and he literally said, I hope this hurricane comes to Texas and kills me so I don't have to think about your film anymore. But he mentioned how the commercials repeated. And I was like, yeah, no, you fucking dipshit. That's what happened when you were watching TV. Like, the commercials repeated.
I think that one of the most exciting moments for us was figuring out which one of those commercials we were gonna have be the repeating local commercial.
Well, it's
like
funny too.
when we had.
I think it's funny. Like I had initially had this. I think the initial conversation was well, I think Sean Jones's commercial, the Phil's Carpet, is the type of thing that, I mean, it's funny. Years later, when I was working in marketing, I would do all these car ads, and those are the type of media buys that they always like buy stupid amounts of in the same block, so it's obnoxiously in your head. So in thinking like, okay, like Sean Jones will be the carpet commercial, will air a bunch because he's probably the psychopath that would do that. But then I remember there was a conversation about what was the other one, and I think it's the Demolition Derby, right?
Tuesday.
Yeah. But yeah, so that was like the commercial breaks was really important. And then the third thing was the idea of like, how do you see this film? Like literally part of the distribution strategy was so important to why the found of a really important facet of the found footage angle that no one ever thinks about, right? So as soon as the movie was done, we put it on torrent sites. And like I literally had my buddy put it on Cinemageddon and say that my godmother Mary Lou taped this off of local TV back in the 80s. So for the first 6 months of this movie being complete, because we finished it in March of 2012, like literally right before we started shooting Call Girl Cthulhu, and it was people were downloading it saying thanks God for Aunt Lulu,
it was so fun to watch the reactions. it was a snapshot. Yeah.
And then we made VHS tapes, and I would go up to like I remember I went to Severed, the VHS convention with my then girlfriend, now wife. We left copies in the bathroom. We threw them out the fucking window. And people would find them. I think Louis Justin has one of the first tapes we made. I think Johnny Dickey does too. It's so funny, but like there's that, and then literally Pop Cinema, when they first released the movie, it was on VHS only from August until I think October, and then it
was a couple months, like a 3-month span where you could only get it on the tape, and there was only, I can't remember if it's 250 or 350, but yeah.
Yeah. It was a little bit. I think it was 300, and it was just like literally like. People bought, and that was one of my favorite things about it when it first came out. There was a review that described it that said like I had to dust off my VCR just to watch this. It felt like a ritual. The guy described it like not so much as a movie as an experience. And I was like, well, shit, that's like God. I don't want to make movies anymore. I want to make experiences.
Yeah. It's a good way to put it. I had a guy. I don't even know if I told you this, Chris. I had a guy message me on Twitter once who got the tape on eBay, and he said in order to get the tape, he also had to get a VCR on eBay. Before we had it out on DVD, he was like, I got the tape and I got a VCR, man. Like,
so funny. Yeah, I mean, there's like plenty of crazy stories involved with that movie. Like a friend of mine out in Columbus, he had pretended like he had downloaded it to Cinemageddon and then put it on a VHS tape and tried to convince his roommates that it was a real thing, but his roommates were from Baltimore, and as they were watching it, they were like, wait a minute, is this Chris's movie?
Now,
that's great.
That's so great. The one thing I want to talk about, and this is the commercials and the format, is that I talked about this on a previous episode. I think Chris had mentioned that I wish I was on, but the last episode of the podcast, we talked about TV terror, so we were talking about Halloween TV specials, Halloween TV movies, and we were talking about commercials. And I've mentioned probably too much on this podcast already. My parents used to make these epic EP VHS tapes that they would record all kinds of random shit. So I would have Garfield's Halloween Adventure with It's the Great Pumpkin, Charlie Brown, and then Empire Strikes Back, and then Baby the Dinosaur, which I still don't understand. I feel like that movie's disappeared and no one believes it.
Yeah, like Baby, the Legend of the Lost Dinosaur, or whatever it's called. Is it something like that, or like?
Yeah, it's something like that. It was a weird tape, but I just remember like just watching it out of season, like watching those Halloween specials and all the commercials. And I never skipped the commercials because I thought it was part of the experience. And that's what I really loved about this idea and like a way to do found footage, because it makes it natural, and it reminded me of all those fucking VHS tapes I consumed as a kid. And I'm assuming for you, and both of you, I should say, that was your similar experience.
I was going to say that it's interesting for me because look, like Jimmy and I are both, I mean, Jimmy's, you got 5 years on me, but I grew up in a house of, I was an accident, right? So my brother's 7 years older, my sister's 5 years older, but I basically grew up watching a lot of the VHS tapes that they had like recorded off TV in the 80s. And I was mostly a kid in the early 90s, but like it was one of those things where I would watch those tapes and like, yeah, they were taped right off TV. So I'd be watching those commercials just like you did with these Halloween specials. Like, and there are tapes, like my first tape of the Monster Squad has this great, because they taped Monster Squad, I think, off Cinemax or HBO. And right before Monster Squad, there's an episode of Evening Magazine, which is like this Baltimore show where they talk about they do like it's the anniversary of the world's broadcast, and it's like super cool because like they recreate like people like trying to get like out of town in Grover's Bend or whatever that town's called. But yeah, like it's just crazy to me because in my head that is just as important and just as a part of Monster Squad, even though no one else's experience in Monster Squad is the evening news or the evening magazine segment about Halloween.
It's ceremonial in that way, right?
Absolutely.
It's like it's part,
it's a tradition, which is really funny if you think about it. Like Halloween, like it's weird to think about like this, like I mean, fuck, now you're gonna start talking about like ghost hunting, like stone tape theory or something. But like the idea of things being recorded and played every year at the same time, like that's heavy shit, man.
Yeah.
The thing is, like I had not touched McDonald's in like probably 10, 15 years now at this point.
Right.
But like I still remember all those fucking McDonald's like, you know, Halloween commercials with the
promos,
McNuggets.
absolutely.
With the, you know, McDugget says Dracula, the Halloween buckets like McBoo and all that shit. Like it's ingrained in me. And, you know, I'm going to give you guys credit because when I started Cinematic Void, part of the thing when I was building my pre-show is kind of based on the idea of the VHS mixtape. And I think part of what got it conscious in my head was because of WNUF, because it's like I love commercials. So you go and find the weirdest and like cool things, and like a lot of them are Halloween commercials.
Yeah.
Like every fucking brand made a Halloween commercial, from Coors Light to Budweiser to like, you know, carpet places and all kinds of shit. And like that's just how I kind of like built my reels. And, you know, part of it was just like, you know, seeing this film, and we'll get into a little bit being part of it, was just like it just reminded me of like how much I love that shit, and how commercials for the most part aren't as fun, or like they don't instill nostalgia now, because now like I feel like obviously you're being sold something in a commercial, but now it's a little like more slick and apparent, where before it was
there's
more
also
fun.
a lot less locals. It's a lot. There's a lot less local stuff.
And it's funny, when we were making the movie, someone who helped us with the story was Jamie Nash, and you know, Jamie Nash. It's funny when he was talking like, what year does this take place? I told him it was 1987 is what we say in our heads, but it's never said in the movie that it's 1987.
Yeah.
I mean, the marketing it is, but not in the movie itself. And he was like, that's good, because like that's the perfect cusp before things start getting a lot less local. And I think he's right. I mean, like literally those tapes that I have that I hold very dear, like by the early 90s, there were very few channels that were showing that many local ads, just because the advertising budgets got tighter, you know?
Yeah.
So.
As the film has gotten out there, do you find a younger audience has a harder time, like, kind of comprehending that portion of it?
Yes. And it's crazy to me too, because they don't get the idea of like literally, like we said, like this kid that fucking emailed me that shit. And the guy, he's not even gonna listen to this. But I'm talking to him about him enough. I shouldn't give him any credit. He literally had a fucking Blue Lives Matter sticker on his fucking phone. Oh, fucking. Anyway, but like
Hey, Chris, hold on. Fuck that kid. Okay.
So basically, but we get that a lot. Like people don't understand why the commercials repeat, and they don't understand the idea of commercials. Like literally,
They don't understand the idea of local personalities being celebrities.
Right.
Which is a thing that doesn't exist anymore. Local television personalities being celebrity, that's just not something that a 15-year-old would ever experience, you know?
Well, it's funny too, because like for me, the local stuff, I think all of us here, like it feels so hard, like charming, and like you have this connection to it. But I remember talking years ago to I think it was my brother-in-law actually. He was saying, it's like, oh, I hate local news. It just feels so cheap. And I'm like, are you joking me? I love local anything because I feel a sense of community toward it. And I think what's really interesting for the Midnight Crew movies, we've always had this like I guess for me, it comes out of growing up in a big Italian family or like playing in punk rock bands. A sense of community is really important to how I approach storytelling and how we approach storytelling making these movies. So like when we made WNUF, it was like, I want to make the ensemble found footage movie. I joke, but it really is like Christopher Guest making a found footage horror movie.
We'll get back to the commercials a little bit, but like the actual, like the news the news portion of it. Like you have the newsroom, you have the actual on-site stuff. Like, how did you guys go about filming? Because I think, and you can correct me wrong, you guys were using as authentic as equipment as you could get to recreate that imagery.
Yeah, so the cameras, I'll talk about that really quickly. The cameras, some of the stuff we shot on SVHS, I ended up buying. This is probably the most anyone's ever paid for an SVHS camera in the 2000s. But I bought like $300 or $400 SVHS camera, and that was some of the stuff was shot on that. Some of it was shot on a VHS camera on the certain days because the SVHS battery would die really quickly. But the majority of the film was shot on the broadcast cameras that I had worked with previously when I was at a local TV station. DV cam. So it was tape stock, but it was digital basically. I mean, like, but it did shoot the tape, and it was shot. I want to say it was standard definition, but it was like anamorphic standard definition, and we cropped the side of the screen. Yeah, and then a couple of the commercials were shot digitally, but not like in a way that first no one would fucking know, or if they were shot digitally, it was supposed to be it was supposed to look like film. So we'd shoot 24 frames.
Yeah.
Yeah, like the tampon ad was like a Panasonic AF100 or something. So yeah.
But
and then talk about the sets, Chris. Talk about
at the end.
Maybe? Yeah. The actual sets of the studio.
Oh shit! Yeah. I thought you said the cassettes. I was like, oh yeah. So basically, where I used to work many years ago, we basically used this set that they had for it was a government TV channel, and it basically had this facade that was just like, I think it was just like a city skyline behind it, but we just covered that with Halloween stuff because we didn't want the city to look like Baltimore. So we literally went to like it's mostly just stuff from Dollar Tree, like
Dollar Store.
Inflatable ghosts, orange and black streamers, and then I mean, that was one of the only like news, like, well, obviously it was the only news sex. That's the only thing in the fucking movie like that. But like it was pretty, it wasn't a lot of set dressing. What I will say about that is what sells that is the makeup for that scene.
Yeah,
like Leah, who's our makeup artist for that, did a really great job. And it's really funny. I always think about this moment when I was on set and she did Leanna Chamish, who plays Deborah Merritt, the witch newscaster. I walked in and I saw Leanna's makeup and I was like, Leah, like, that's too much. Like, that's gonna be insane. And Leah like looked at me like, you don't know what you're fucking talking about. Like, you don't know what women's makeup looked like in the 1980s. And I was like, all right, I'll give it a shot. And I felt like she looked insane until we put it through the VCR, and the quality, like, I was like, no, I just wasn't seeing it how I've seen that stuff. So it was like this really weird moment where I was like, oh shit, the VCR, like the degeneration in copies really made that all come together for me. It was crazy. So
that was going to be my next question. So after you shot everything and you did the edit on the film, you actually ran copies through VCR to degrade it so it had that VHS quality. How many times did you degrade the film down?
It's funny. I was actually just looking at this because I'm doing the same thing for some of the stuff in the sequel right now. The final edit, I'm pretty sure, is the third VCR pass. I'm pretty sure it's the third one.
I remember you telling me that, so that lines up.
So like, yeah, so it's like one of those situations where, and there might be one or two things where I only did twice, or one maybe I did 4 times because they had to look less or more based off what the previous footage was. But yeah, I mean, like, because my whole thing was like, I mean, I'm sure you guys grew up like, like I used to get bootleg tape trading catalogs, and I used to like trade tapes with people, and like, like I remember the first time I saw a DVD of Evil Dead, I was like, I can actually watch this now. Whereas like when I had the bootleg, I was like, I seriously don't know what the fuck is happening. Like, it was crazy. I mean, I still have this tape somewhere of Sam Raimi's short films.
Oh Jesus, I had a copy of that. Yeah. It's fucking unwatchable.
Yeah, it is. It really is. But that's like the only one that existed. But yeah, it's so about 3 times.
Which I think is the right amount, because I think if you pushed it too far, it becomes unwatchable. And now it's like, I don't want to say YouTube quality standard def, but it looks like it came off of someone's VHS tape.
Exactly.
And if you degrade it too much, it's like, it loses the joy because it looks like shit. It's the right amount of looking like shit, more or less.
No, it's a really fine dance. It really is. Yeah.
The one thing I know from both of you guys, and I guess we can get in this part, is like, you guys shot a lot of it. You shot a lot of commercials, but then you brought other people in to do the commercials. You want to talk about how that came about?
So what ended up happening was, and this is really an interesting conversation, like in twofold. One, people don't, most people know us for WNUF, and that's totally cool. I think we're very fortunate to even have any movie people even know anything that we've done for, right? I will gladly take WNUF. But we were making Call Girl. We were raising money for Call Girl while we made WNUF, which is fucking insane. We were in pre-production on Call Girl while I was editing WNUF. So it was a crazy time. And really, we made WNUF as the movie that was just sort of like a time killer. I'm getting to the point. We made WNUF as a time killer. Like, oh, we should just do this. It'll be fun. Then we'll have 2 movies at the end. Like, we didn't think WNUF was gonna be the movie that took off. We thought Call Girl would be the one that really. I mean, Call Girl was like what 40 times the budget or something. But like,
yes.
So, long story short, like, the commercials were an interesting situation because you have to make a ton, and I started like I would like do a lunch break and write a bunch of them, but I was like I had concerns that everything coming from the same voice would be dangerous, and also the amount of commercials would be like almost impossible to do in the context of making Call Girl and taking and wanting to turn around fast. So what ended up happening was I initially so we have a bunch of writers on the movie that usually don't get credit, like meaning like don't get the credit they deserve. Like Pat Stork wrote a ton. Pat Stork like literally would send me, like in a course of a week, he sent me 30 commercials, and I think we made probably 15 of them. And what was happened was I had all these writers come over my house and do like I showed them all the stock footage I have, because most of this was written in stock footage. Early on, actually, Jimmy, you probably remember this. An early draft of the script has commercials that you straight up you wrote commercials to shoot,
Yes.
And I think the conversation
before you had the hard drive of the footage, I wasn't aligned with the plan, so I just wrote a bunch of commercials. And then you're like, no, I have this hard drive with all this footage that we can write commercials to, and then we don't have to shoot anything, dumbass.
That's so funny. I literally, like, that's how fast we were going. I'd be like, why'd you do this, Jimmy? And he was like, I don't know, because you didn't fucking tell me.
You said like, right.
Yeah. So like, but like the commercial, like, so like the first pass that Jimmy did had a couple fake commercials in it, and then like from that point when we wrote the script, it was just a commercial break. So what ended up happening was so I had like 4 or 5 writers come over, showed them the footage, and we did that. And then they had their assignments. Like I said, Pat, write a beer, like what did Pat, like, Pat, write Galaxy Pilot based off this short film that we have footage from. Carly, can you make some of these aren't even in the movie. Can you make a commercial based around this Civil War footage and make it a miniseries? So like we had all these things like that. But then I was also like the entire fucking movie can't be stock footage or like old 80s filmmaker or 90s filmmaker clips. Like I do need to shoot some stuff. So like we shot a couple, like obviously like my buddy Matt wrote the tampon ad that I DP'd on. And then but then Jim, we reached out to you and our buddy Lonnie Martin, Scott McCubbin, Sean Jones, because we were like, hey, can you guys just make one? And so that way it's sort of like Grindhouse. It's like guest directors, And that was really important for us because we didn't want everything to we just made it we wanted to diversify where it was coming from, It was just really critical to us. So.
In retrospect, that was like it makes it feel like it's not just you and me.
Yeah,
like
exactly.
in the best way possible. Yeah.
Yeah, definitely.
So I just want to say I'm always been grateful that you guys allowed me to have my small 30 seconds of the 84 minute long runtime in WNUF.
Dude, it's so good.
Yeah, it's great. I love that when it spins to the grave. Oh, chef's kiss.
So
Jim, I got to tell you a story about your commercial. I spoke to some college students. Occasionally people invite me and I'm like, I'm a dropout. Like, I don't know what you want me to tell you. Stay in school. But they introduced me. They just they must have just looked up IMDb and just wrote down some random titles, and you have me as the producer of your commercial. And so they introduced me to like this like filmmaking group as the producer of Parents Against Partying. Which is your commercial. Like, it's so fucking funny. And I was like, number one, I actually had nothing to do with making that. Number two, that's a fake commercial.
Oh, that's correct. I mean, I think I just put an individual like credit for because I didn't know what was going to happen with how.
Yeah, no, it's just funny. I love that. I love that somebody introduced me to a group of future filmmakers.
Well, and that makes another point though. look, if you've seen the movie, you know, but if somebody is listening and they haven't seen the movie, there's no credits in the movie. And we did that on purpose because obviously, like, we didn't want it to break the norm. And like we didn't want to break the conceit of the story and like make it, we wanted to make it feel real. So like there are a ton of people that credit you and Sean Jones as the directors. And it's like this weird, it's like so funny where it's like I mean, you know, it is what it is. Like, who fucking cares? I mean, like, I really don't care, but it's just one of those funny things where, like, unless somebody didn't do interviews with us and, like, or, like, do the detective work, like, you know, if this movie had come out 30 years ago, like, literally actually 30 years ago, no one would even know who have directed this.
There was no paper trail.
That digital trail,
But the reason why I want to talk about, like, you know, bringing me in and everyone else that made commercials, because I remember there was very, very strict guidelines that you had to hit in order to have your commercial in there. And I was like, fuck, I better not fuck this up. I'm
trying to think. You probably remember this better than I do. The only thing I remember was you absolutely have to make this in even 30. I was really serious about that. I was like 30 seconds. I remember a handful of folks, I can't remember who it was at this point, but like gave me like 31 seconds or 32 seconds. And I went back and chopped things up. I was like, no, 30 seconds.
The 30 seconds was the one thing. And then it was like, it has to look like the 80s. I remember one of the actors I had who was on the web series I was working on at the time had a neck tattoo. Or actually, it wasn't even his neck tattoo because we covered up a scarf, but he hadn't shaved. And you're like, that guy didn't shave. He doesn't look like a kid. No, close up.
That's so funny. I actually feel like the 80s are easier to fake visually than what I'm having experience right now with the 90s is it's really hard. Every guy I know that like has a beard now or facial hair, and I feel like in the 80s you get away with a beard or like shaved into a mustache and like it works the 80s. But the 90s for me, there's not as many beards, you know, and that's one thing that's been really tricky. The visual approach to the 90s has been a lot trickier, whereas the 80s, especially when we were working, the 80s look was in vogue, like for like people our age. So
yeah, it was really easy to find people who look like it. Yeah.
I mean, my one conceit when I was doing the Parents Against Partying commercial was that, you know, I could have pushed and had everyone look super 80s, but then I was like, what I did is like I watched hours and hours of fucking PSAs and like anti-drug commercials, and what my takeaway from that was, no one really leaned hard into the era. Everyone just looked like it's timeless. This could have been 1970, 1980. So I went with that aesthetic, probably because it was also cheaper for me to do. But
absolutely, yeah. Well, it's really funny. It's funny when you talk about that timelessness. You're right. I mean, like I feel like there's. It's just interesting to me, like what commercials from the 80s they were still airing up until the mid 90s, even like because they felt so timeless. Whereas like there's very few 90s commercials that you could run in 2005, you know, and people would go, oh yeah.
Well, I just think back to it because I shot my commercial in basically 2 hours, and then I did an edit, and then I know I was like, gotta get in 30 seconds, and I know I was like pushing like people's lines because I had that voiceover, and I'm just like cutting frames out and like covering it up. I was just like, oh man, can't fuck this up. But
no, totally.
I will say my commercial, when I turned it in, I was like, man, I just don't want it to stick out for a sore thumb because like I did shoot. What I ended up doing is like I shot on a Canon 7D, which it's good prosumer camera for the time, and I definitely shot at 24 frames because like most of those
it would have been a film commercial,
And I did that, and I knew I was gonna crop, so I just like knew my sides were useless, and then just all that stuff, and then just like I think I had to send you guys a script. You had to approve the script, like okay, that works, and then I don't know if I sent you a shot list. I think I maybe did.
I don't think so. I don't know shot list.
Yeah. I don't know if I was just sending just like, here guys, this is what I'm doing. But I know I hadn't written in a commercial format since maybe like community college or college when like you took like media production at like Harvard Community College or whatever. You had to like, there's the format for your TV commercial. Like what left side? That's all your visuals. Right side is all your text. I could be getting them backwards, but like actually looked up the format and wrote it that way, and it's like, god damn it. And I probably wouldn't have mattered to you guys if I just sent the script.
Yeah, I was gonna say I feel like some of the other people literally just sent us emails. It
was. There were emailed scripts, absolutely.
God damn it.
That's so funny.
Dude, you were committed. That's why it turned out so good.
Now, once the film was out there and you got the distribution and it was getting out there in the world, were you caught off guard by how the movie kind of took off?
Yes, yes, and I should say, and I can only speak for me right now. Obviously, Jimmy should. I'd love to hear what he says about this. But like, when we finished the movie, okay, as a filmmaker, as soon as I finish something, I'm immediately disappointed. Like, I'm like, all I see are my mistakes. Like, I always call editing the dark night of the soul, because you're just forced to stare down every fucking shitty decision you had to compromise on, or any of those things. Like, I mean, like, literally, like the movie we're making right now is a long dark night of the soul. What Happens Next Will Scare You, because it was like, it took forever to get finished. But when we were making WNUF, the whole time I was like, I was having a fucking blast making that, because it was just like so much fun, and there wasn't, because the movie could look cheap and a little shitty on purpose, it was like, this is great. It felt very liberating. When I finished the movie, I was immediately like, God, I wish I was still working on it, which probably is why I never stopped thinking about making a sequel, even at the get-go. But like, what ended up happening was, I knew we had something really special. And it was the first time I had ever felt like, I really love this movie. And like, I still love the other movies we've made, but this one, there's something about this movie that's like, it really feels like everything I was trying to achieve, like, for the most part, lands. There's a couple things here and there that I'm not like over the moon about, but I'm happy with it. And because we had seen so many people make 80s movies that were like laughing at the 80s and not like having fun with, like, it didn't come from a place of love. And we really loved this stuff.
Yes.
And my moment, I think, for me, when I realized we had something really special, was the New York Times had found out about the movie and asked me to do an interview. And we, you know, the guy was just like really, really sweet and saying really nice things. And then I realized, like, dude, like, people are gonna care about this in a way that no one else had ever gave a shit about our other movies. So I was shocked, but at the same time too, it makes sense to me in retrospect. Jimmy?
On my end, so it was sort of a reversal. So in the beginning, I always use this quote, and maybe he doesn't remember saying it to me, but he did, when we had the big long conversation about whether we were going to like dive in and go full force and make the movie, which we have those conversations, you know, are we going to spend years of our life on this thing? Chris said to me, no one's going to like this movie, but we're going to do it anyway. And it was like a rallying cry. It was like a rallying cry for the two of us.
Yeah.
And so, you know, I always remember that. And
that's funny.
Yeah, you said that to me.
I believe you.
And so, but then as we were doing it, I started to feel like, I mean, just even the first big thing we did was the newscast, and you know, all film shoots are stressful, but it was so much fucking fun, like to a level that our stuff never is fun doing, because like we had it was like we were capturing like what we grew up with in a way that like we were like giving birth to our like memories in a way. And I remember like I like remember sitting there at the desk and being like, this is the coolest fucking thing we've ever done, and we're just starting, right? And then as we went along, like the stuff with the Weber house, like that was also stressful, but those 2 nights were our smoothest, most fun days that we've ever had making movies. And like we've probably had collectively like 100 days of shooting in all our films, and those 2 days, which are like extremely difficult to pull off, right? In my mind, I remember them as stressful but extremely fun. And in the moment, especially when when Paul was just like interviewing all the things, and everybody was just all the costume people outdoors were just riffing and like ad-libbing with your direction, like it felt special even then. And I started to change the way that I thought like maybe people will care. And then I think it was before the New York Times, John Squires shared a trailer. And like he didn't know anything about it. Like we didn't send him the trailer. He like found the trailer that we shared, and it like that blew up, that share, and it was sort of this change. I was like, no, people are gonna care. Like I'm kind of shocked people might actually love this thing. But it started from a place of Chris saying, like, no one's gonna care.
Well, and that's the joke that I've said subsequently. Like, I always say no one was crazy enough to make this movie how we would make it, and then I would make the joke we were those crazy nobodies. But like, you're right. Like, I literally went into this thinking like, like, I don't know, man. Like when I was doing my part of the writing, I remember like going to my godmother, Mary Lou. I went to her house, and she's a pack rat, and she has walls of VHS tapes, and I just pulled a bunch of VHS tapes, one of which was like a copy of a couple episodes of this show called People Are Talking, which is like an old Baltimore talk show with Oprah and Richard Scher, and like it's them talking about kids pissing their bed, and like let me tell you something. In my head, I was like, this would never win an Academy Award, but this is fucking gold to me. And like, I'm watching this like it's art. And like, I'm just fascinated and just enamored. And like, and that's the way I was like, when I said no one's going to like this movie, that's what I was really thinking. I was thinking people were going to say like, it's just sort of weird. It's like, you know, you find something that you really care about. And if you care about it deep enough, you just fucking say well, I don't pray, but like, you know, you say a prayer and just hope it finds its audience. And this movie found its audience. We're really lucky. I mean, we're just really lucky.
So lucky.
Yeah.
One thing I want to talk about, because we've talked about the 80s aspect of it, and this is someone as a person that programs repertory cinema, and I show a lot of things from the 80s, is I think people are obsessed with the 80s, but I think their nostalgia is for the wrong stuff, because I see a lot of people that try to make 80s throwbacks, and I always feel like they miss the mark because they're looking at the wrong thing. And the way I always view 80s and why I think 80s movies work in a different way than like any other decade is because they were made in that decade. And you got to understand what was going on. You had Ronald Reagan. You had like lots of cocaine on set, which explains a lot of movies. Tell me Any Which Way But Loose was not made with like a fucking like ton of blow. But come on, bare knuckle boxing and orangutan. That's completely.
No, I think you're totally right, man. I mean, like, there's just like, well, it's weird to me too. It's like what movies get the 80s right versus which ones don't. Like, or like which movies like prey on the wrong things. Like, I always think about the thing that always just broke my heart, or not broke my heart because I didn't really care about that much, but like was just like cringeworthy to me was like there was like a VH1 made a movie a couple years back, at least now a couple years back, was called like Totally Awesome or something, and it was like an 80s like style period piece, like a comedy, and it just felt so like they went to Party City, and that's how they did the costume for their movie. And just looking back at that, I was like, I don't want to fucking make that movie. Or like, and not to name anything by name or even make this insinuation, but a lot of like horror movie people that want to make 80s slashers, you know, it's like they don't get why those movies are special. All they want to do is make it a big joke. And don't get me wrong, look, there's plenty of jokes there's plenty of jokes that are making fun of like the time, but a lot of the jokes were trying to make fun of the time in the context of what we know now. Or like the context of why that was like, you know, like why that was misguided, you know, like we're making jokes at the expense of past mistakes.
I mean, that's one of the things to see when you see a lot of people like, oh, it's an 80s throwback, and I go and watch it, and it's just like, this is not the 80s. This is just what you think the 80s were. And I know some of it is like some people just didn't grow up in that decade, and like they're just based on like watching Friday the 13th or whatever. And it's just, I just think there's a disconnect. It's like the way to make an 80s movie is to make a really good movie in the decade you're making it in. Yeah. And like, and just embracing what your influences are. And like, I see it so much, and like, which is also why I don't really screen a lot of newer films. Cause like I get people send me films. They're like, hey, screen this. And I'm like, well, I'm technically repertory, which is just my built-in excuse not to show anything past like 1994 or whatever. But but you know, I do make exceptions, and like I've shown newer things, and like I think it's like you got to capture the spirit, but the spirit isn't what you think it is. It's not like the crazy hair, or like, you know, it's sort of like when I see a punk in a movie. And like
yes,
I've got real hard feelings about this, Jim. Oh my god.
I mean,
well, it's always through a lens of parody. Right? It always feels like they're like people are making fun of the era rather than from endearment, you know?
But that's what Jimmy, what you just said is a really good point. Like, it's the difference. Is it satire, parody, or homage? And I really feel like we found a line between satire and homage, whereas a lot of people go straight to parody.
Right. Ours never does that. I mean, we tried.
We tried. Yeah.
I do want to talk about a screening that did happen that you both were at, which was the one I ended up doing, which was the first year I did Cinematic Void. Because I knew, Chris, you were going to be in LA, and I was like, well, if you're going to be in LA, let me figure this out. Because I figured, like, I'll just shoehorn a screening in. And I was like, fuck it, let's do WNUF. And then it's like, well, I should pair it with something else. And I know Call Girl was out, but I was like, I wanted to do something Halloween centric because this is going to be my first Halloween show. And I was like, I'll just do the Midnight Hour because it's a TV movie and no one's going to yell at me for screening that. But
dude, it was the best. I mean, like that was my favorite screening I think we've ever done of that because like the idea of screening with Midnight Hour, which in my opinion is the quintessential, like that is the Halloween movie to me, was just like chef's kiss, man. And then you dressed up as the main character was awesome. It was so good.
I mean, when I knew I was doing the screening, and like there was a couple times I was scared because like the theater was going to be renovated, like, oh, we're going to do renovations this week, can you move your screening? I'm like, I can't ask people to move their plane tickets that aren't like, you know. It's so I basically fought I mean, it wasn't much of a fight. They just pushed back the renovation without fighting too much. But I was like, fuck, dude. Because like I was prepared to go somewhere else and do it because like I really wanted to see this happen because like I love this movie and I love the Midnight Hour and I just wanted to do like an 80s night of Halloween, how I picture it.
Such a fun night.
Because I agree, and I talked about this on the other episode that Chris wishes he was on. I talked about the Midnight Hour, which I do think is really the quintessential Halloween movie. More so than most Halloween movies. But I think WNUF is a great pairing with it, and I'm talking as a programmer because like you get the nostalgia of something you would watch that you recorded off a Halloween night with a movie that played kind of on Halloween. I think Midnight Hour actually played November 1st because it was a Saturday.
I think you're right, which is really funny in retrospect. I mean, this is my personal connection to it. I'd read about Midnight Hour and like the, you know, like Psychotronic Film Guide or whatever those old guides used to have, and I'd always wanted a copy. And then Anchor Bay put out a tape back, basically it's like late 90s. And my buddy Matt let me borrow it. And I had it, I didn't watch it until November 1st. And that's one of those movies that like immediately makes you nostalgic for Halloween no matter when you watch it. And I watched it November 1st and I just had this sort of like, there's just like this sadness. There's a sadness of November 1st that is like unmatched. I personally, me speaking for me personally, but like watching that on November 1st for me, the first time I saw it, I think I was in high school, was just this weird moment where like, man, like Midnight Hour fills the screen with such like the excitement of Halloween, the hype of it, and that weird sort of like lonely romanticism of Halloween that like a lot of horror movies, a lot of Halloween movies don't get. Like there's definitely that sort of like idea of like being alone in a crowd in a good Halloween movie, you know?
Yeah.
So.
And that's why I put these two together because I think it was the perfect, even though WNUF wasn't made in the 80s, it feels like the 80s. And the Midnight Hour is like not only one of the great 80s horror movies, great horror TV movies. I think I'm going to go out on a limb and say it is the greatest Halloween set movie it made. I know people were like, what about Halloween? I would just shut the fuck up.
Yeah. It's dude, that's basic shit, man. That's like that's like if somebody asks you what your favorite movie is and you say Citizen Kane or Gone with the Wind or some bullshit. It's like, no.
Obviously, Chris, you're currently working on the WNUF sequel, but both you guys have a movie that's getting ready to come out and hit the festival, or at least the virtual festival circuit, pretty soon. You want to talk about that? And that's What Happens Next Will Scare You.
Absolutely, yeah. So, What Happens Next Will Scare You. Basically, the log line is this. So this group of clickbait journalists are getting together to write and vote on their top 13 scariest viral videos for like a Halloween listicle. But an early entry into the night unleashes this force that basically all the monsters and creatures and villains from these viral videos come into the real world and wreak havoc. That's a very shitty telling of the log line. Jimmy probably would have done a better job.
No, dude, you did good.
But yeah, no, I mean it's basically like it's our found footage horror anthology, and it's you know we it's been a long road with this one just because I mean I think we'll just be really honest. Like, look, we when we made Call Girl, we made WNUF, our jobs were not our careers. Jimmy didn't have his own business. I wasn't married. It's one of those things where like I didn't have a house. Like, I mean, God, Jimmy, you closed on your house when you were doing Witch's Brew, didn't you?
Yes, I did.
Yeah. He closed on a fucking house. But like literally, like, this movie it's taken a lot longer, and it's kind of funny that why this movie has taken longer is a lot about the thematic premise of what this movie is, right?
Yes.
Not the literal premise, but the idea of, like, are we as creators putting out meaningful content into the world, or are we just sort of doing jazz hands on the internet all the fucking time? And that's the best way to describe this movie. It really is about, like, how do we create and distribute in a way that's worthy of an audience.
It's weird how it became like its own, like, what it's about. You know what I mean? Like the experience of making it. You know, the trials and tribulations of whether, you know, we're putting out garbage content or whether we're putting out meaningful work. Yeah.
Well, and it's really funny. I'll tell this story really quickly without naming anybody, because gotta be careful. We had been approached by some guys that made some movies. They'd seen WNUF. They literally told us how much they loved WNUF, and they regretted not, like, talking it up on their channels. And they had basically told us that, listen, we want to produce your next film. So we pitched them. God, at the end of the day, probably like 40 ideas. 40. They said, we want to make a ghost movie, or we want to make a slasher movie. So we pitched them 20 slasher movies, pitched them 20 ghost movies. They're like, that's great. You know, which of these 10 would you do for, like, around $100,000? And at the time, this is a really personal story that I think, I think it's really important to tell this in a way that doesn't make us look like dicks, but looks like human beings. At the time, Jimmy and I sort of sat down. We were like, well, none of the stories they're really excited about are anything that seems personal to us. And if we're gonna make a movie for $100,000 and not own it, like, look, I get it. We made Call Girl for 40. We made WNUF for under $2,000. It's like we don't care about making money. Well, let me care about kind of how to say this. If you're going to invest in the time that it takes to make these movies, you have to care about the subject matter. And we just sort of said, like, I don't really know if I care about any of these like this. Plus, the other portion of it was, you make a movie for $100,000 that you don't own, you're going to get a paycheck, but it's not a real paycheck, right? I think it would have been $10,000 split between the two of us to make that movie for someone else. So $5,000, at least a year and a half of your life to make this movie. And it was like, it seemed really silly. And that whole conversation about what it took to be a filmmaker, even at the you know, low, maybe you get a spot on Netflix or Shudder. Like, what does that really mean? Is that what we want out of life? You know? And we sort of had this movie, we sat back, and then one of the ideas we pitched those folks was What Happens Next Will Scare You. And they definitely didn't like that one.
That wasn't on their list.
And it was like one of those funny things where it was like, we literally sat down with a piece of paper, like, what's our next movie going to be? And we had a couple ones that I still think are really cool concepts, but, like, they were not going to work within our lives from the scope. And, like, What Happens Next, we just kept coming back to. Thematically, it made sense. So What Happens Next, it's funny, we finished it. I literally just finished the final cut files, all mastered and ready to go about a week ago, and it's premiering in
October 21st. October 21st through 25th. We don't have, like, a screening link to send people to yet, but hopefully by the time this is out, we'll have a little bit more information. It's going to be $15 for just to screen the individual film, and that'll be on demand for 5 days. And I believe when you buy a $15 ticket that you can watch it all 5 of those days, so you don't have to watch it immediately. And then they have full passes for the festival for $100, and that's 18 features and 140 shorts. And they're like, it's pretty awesome. It's through, like, you can get it through the Roku app, you can get it through Apple Plus, you can get it through Google. So, like, it's pretty cool.
And that's Nightmares Film Festival.
Yeah, thanks.
Yeah, it's all good, dude. You know, I mean, you I don't know if you have the talking points in front of you. I think you did incredible there.
I don't have anything. I'm ready to tell cast and crew what the fuck is going on.
Yeah.
Now, we talked about what you guys have coming out next, and I'm hoping, and I'm just throwing it out there and just putting it in there, that maybe somehow Cinematic Void can do a screening of this some sort in
We'd
this.
Love to. Yeah.
Awesome.
Yeah.
We'll talk a little offline about that, but, like, be on the lookout for that. But I'm gonna hit you, Chris, because you're currently in production, post-production, or just all around with WNUF 2, and obviously don't want you to spoil it because, hey, you don't want to spoil something that was a sequel to something that was a great surprise. But what is it like tackling this universe again, but in a different decade?
Yeah, so it's really interesting because look, the 90s and the 80s are very different. I actually think, like, if I could talk about specifically the WNUF universe during that, like, you're talking about the Clinton era, and you're also talking about, like, like telecommunications and legislation and or deregulation happened, and you end up getting this thing where it's like way more about like a national audience versus a local audience. And I hope people are going to be okay with it. There's still plenty of local stuff in the WNF sequel, but it's definitely it's a spiritual sequel, but there's a lot of differences, and it's mostly difference because you're looking at it from the standpoint of a decade later in a much different world. Look, Clinton's America versus Ronald Reagan's America is a little different, and I think marketing is different. I think in WNUF, if I could say this, I don't think this gives much away, but it is a little bit of a tonal shift. WNUF is really how we consumed media in the 1980s. I think in WNUF the sequel, I think it's really how the media consumed us in the 1990s, and I think so that's part of it. It is a Halloween movie. It takes place on Halloween. It actually straddles the line between 1994 and 1996. So those are the 2 years. And it's the best way to describe it without giving it away is imagine if Jerry Springer hosted an episode of Sightings is probably the best way to describe it. And it's just like, it's weird though, because I can't, look, we were very fortunate. And Jimmy and I talk about this quite a bit. It's like, look, as a filmmaker, as an artist, expectation is your enemy. I think as a storyteller, expectation is your enemy. You're always reversing expectation. You never want to have someone see what you're about to do next. So with WNUF 2, as I'll call it, because that's not even actually the title, but I don't want to give the title out yet. With WNUF 2, it's tricky because people are going into this knowing that it's a sequel. And while somebody may discover it before they've discovered the original, you have to be careful about. I guess for me, it's like you just gotta like let it be its own thing, but with these weird tangential connections. Like there's returning characters and all those things like that, but it's its own movie. And I gotta tell you, like, it's not gonna take the place of WNUF. Like it can't. Nothing will. If anything, I'm hoping it's not like it's more like almost like something like I don't want to make the shock treatment to my Rocky Horror. But what I'm trying to do is make a movie that stands alone, but in a very different way. So like some people, like when I have told them the plot, they're like, but it's a Halloween movie. I'm like, yeah, it's a Halloween movie. It's actually really funny. I could make a really good comparison to why it's a Halloween movie, especially. But I want to hold that for the audience. So here's the thing. There's a lot of great stuff right now. Like, if anyone's listening to this, we are still taking donations for the GoFundMe, but it's mostly just pre-buys if they want DVDs or VHS tapes, because it's still coming out on VHS. One of the coolest things about this movie that I can't talk about because I'm sure someone will do it before I get a chance to do it if I tell anybody. At the $100 level, if you get a VHS tape, you're also getting an extra special thing that is fucking batshit insane, and I'll tell you guys about it after we finish the recording.
So, just get on that WNUF 2 Season of the Witch. I'm just adding your own subtitle. WNUF 2 Season of the Witch.
Yeah. WNUF 2 with a vengeance.
Yeah. I'd say Electric Boogaloo, but that's been ruined now. Yeah. So WNUF 2 Dead by Dawn, but although my favorite one earlier when we were started like I think the first episode podcast, we were talking about John Carpenter's Halloween. We talked about Halloween 3, but we didn't talk about the direct sequel Halloween 2 because it takes place mostly on November 1st. So we always, I wanted to retitle Halloween 2 November 1st, but
that always makes me think about that. Is that an Australian movie, The Day After Halloween?
Yeah. Which it doesn't really have much to do with Halloween at all. It's just the real title Snapshot is much more accurate than the cash in. Like you've seen Halloween. This is what happens the day after in Australia, where you even celebrate Halloween. I don't know. I'm really excited for this to come out. And like I said, I love you guys. You guys have made some incredible movies. You are the true independents where I feel like you bust your ass. You have loved what you're doing. And that's kind of why I want to turn to Jimmy here, because you've taken what you love and you've created, I'd say, a pretty successsul business out of it. You want to talk about your...
I appreciate that. Yeah. I've been doing, so pretty much the entire time we were making movies, I was working retail, and honestly, I stayed in that retail job because I didn't like create grander aspirations, because it's the perfect job for making low budget movies, right? I had like I could take off a month to make a movie in the summer, like, and just go and just disappear for 30 days because like I didn't owe anyone because it wasn't my career, right? But as soon as we realized, soon after that situation Chris told the story for, that like we weren't going to be making movies every summer like we had been doing, I had to figure out, okay, like, well, I'm not going to keep working retail, like what am I going to do? And it was just something that I've been thinking about doing for about a decade, script butcher. So I am basically a script consultant. People send me scripts, honestly, from all over the world, which has been really surprising. And I give them notes, and we sort of workshop it, not together. I give them notes, and then occasionally they'll send me another draft until we get it to the point where I think it's ready. And it's been really rewarding. We actually I've consulted now on 4 features that people ended up. And what's great is people come to me because they're aware of the movies that Chris and I make. So I get a lot of people with a DIY spirit, which is fucking awesome, because once I understand, like, oh, I came to you because I love Call Girl of Cthulhu, and then they say, I'm trying to make this script for $40,000, that shapes the way that I'm going to give them notes. And it's been really cool to see people actually make the movies. Like, that was something I didn't anticipate, that there would be some of my clients would actually take the script, workshop it through several drafts, get it to be pretty rock solid, and then go make the damn thing themselves. Like, it's really fucking cool. So yeah, I've been doing that for about 5 years now, and I did that all while we were making What Happens Next Will Scare You. So that was fun. Yeah.
And you're pretty booked up even right now, because like I see when you post up like, hey, I got openings, and it's like 4 months down the line. It's like, god damn, he's just fucking burning through these. And like, do you feel
I am booked until March 4th right now, which is fucking insane. For anyone who's listening, it's October 9th when we're recording this. So I'm like really grateful. I'm really fortunate, and yeah.
I want to just say, because like I actually used your service for a couple things I was working for, and
that's
like,
right, you were one of my first clients. Holy shit, I forgot.
Yeah. Which also tells you about how far I've, like, because I haven't really made a film in a while. But like, I want to just say, like, the notes you gave me were just, it was from a perspective that I kind of needed, because like, I think a lot of people that do script consulting aren't necessarily the people you need to be consulting your script, because a lot of those people don't really understand the nuts and bolts of making a film. Whereas like, you're a producer, you've done like production Bibles, like you can look at a script and see like, I see where this is going to be a problem just from a production standpoint, so I can offer you my insight on like what's going to make this better, so it's more manageable for when you actually go out and make it, which I think is an incredible thing, as opposed to like, well, you didn't write your dream montage right, you need to do it in this format. Also, you need to up the stakes with the cat here, or whatever.
I mean, I do that as well. I'm not gonna lie. I appreciate that, Jim. Yeah, so like I definitely and honestly, it depends on who I'm talking to when I speak, like with producer speak. Like I feel like I was comfortable enough to give you notes that spoke from that perspective. And a lot of times people don't want that perspective from me. But like, if the person understands like filmmaking, I will make notes like, why don't you move this scene to this location, because then you're having one less shooting day, and whoever the producer is that you're sending this to is going to understand, well, instead of 18 days this is going to be 17 days, and it's going to be more enticing to them. So there are those things that absolutely influence, that I've learned through making movies with Chris, for sure.
And besides Script Butcher, you actually talk about scripts because you have your own podcast. Do you want to talk about that too?
So this is the thing. I never had any interest in podcasting. It was absolutely not an aspiration of mine. My friend Jamie Nash, who we've talked about before, he helped with the story on WNUF Halloween Special, and Bob Rose, my other friend Bob Rose, who worked on some of Chris and I's movies as well, including What Happens Next Will Scare You. We were having a chat about screenwriting in just like a Facebook thread, and Bob's like, I have a podcast network. Why don't you guys just come over my house and we'll put a microphone in front of you and you guys can just do what you're doing right now. And we'll just record it. And I was like, okay. And Jamie was like, okay. So it just born out of that. And it's really cool, man. We've been, we just passed 20,000 downloads of the show, which is just insane to me. It's like, who's spending 20,000 hours listening to me talk about screenwriting? Like, dude, who fucking cares? But so it's been really fun. Yeah, we take movies that we do one movie that's in the theaters, which now it's sort of complicated. We're totally gonna break format from here on out. But we do one movie that's in the theaters and one classic. And we try to keep it fresh, and each episode talks about different screenwriting techniques that can be learned from. And sometimes what we do is we see a movie that shouldn't work, and we talk about what were the techniques that the storyteller put in place that made this work, even though it doesn't follow any of the quote unquote rules. It doesn't do the things that like we are told we should do as storytellers, and yet somehow it's awesome. So those are my favorite discussions when we talk about like Coen Brothers movies, with a movie like Fargo, and like who's the main character, and like there's an argument over who is the main character and things like that. So it's been really cool, man. Yeah.
If you guys want to hang out for a bit, I'm gonna take a quick break here, and then when we come back, we're gonna do Rewatch Listen on the Cinematic Void podcast. You guys cool to join?
Sure.
Yeah.
Awesome.
Don't check your dial, folks. You didn't tune into Transylvania's public access station. No, sir. Tonight is Halloween.
Halloween is Satan's night, the night of the devil.
Reporter Frank Stewart has a special Halloween treat in store for viewers tonight. He'll be leading a group of paranormal experts to the infamous Weber House.
Do you know what happened here in the Weber House? Some people got killed. Their son went haywire.
Frank Stewart and his team of experts will conduct the first ever live on TV seance.
Evil works in mysterious ways, Frank. It's unpredictable.
Are there any spirits in the house?
It's scary.
That's far out.
That horror.
Something strange going on in this house. Animal mutilation, paranormal disturbances, devil worship. Wait, whoa, hold on. This is not staged. Hello? Is this the work of the devil? Folks, we are going where no camera crew has gone before. Father, perform the exorcism. This is not some Halloween prank. The grisly evidence of the supernatural is real. We'll be right back.
You're watching the WNUF Halloween Special.
Welcome back. It's now time for on the Cinematic Void podcast. This is the part of the podcast where we talk about all the things we've been reading, watching, and or listening to for the past couple weeks. We haven't really done these since we've been doing all these on Halloweens back to back to back to back, but since we have Jimmy and Chris here with us, I figured it'd be fun to do it.
So I'm gonna throw it to you guys, and go ahead, just jump. Whoever's got something they need to talk about, like what's the current thing you guys are reading, watching, and or listening to.
Chris.
All right. This past week, I watched 2 new Halloween movies, meaning Halloween centered movies. So I watched Hubie Halloween last night, the Adam Sandler movie, which my wife hated, and I thought was pretty funny, with the exception of I really think it's not great. And what I've been saying so far is it's very clear Adam Sandler is not Jim Varney. This is no Ernest Scared Stupid, but it's a nice little Halloween movie, with the problem being how problematic it is that Adam Sandler still does that questionable voice and persona. It's a little not good no more. So there's that. But it's a fun movie. I think all the cameos are super funny. Yeah, that's all I'll say about it, because I think you should go into it cold for the most part. And then I also watched. This was actually kind of a bummer, but I want to be careful because it's a low budget movie, so I try not to talk shit on them. But I watched this movie Mass Hysteria, which is basically about, like, I watched it because it takes place in Salem, and obviously as Jim, you know, I love Salem. We both have a mutual love for Salem. Yeah. And so it's about these people that do like a witchcraft tour in Salem, and it looked like it was a fairly low budget. I'm going to assume under $200,000, and it was just a little too silly for me, and I felt like the horror elements were sort of exploited in a way that didn't seem respectful of the genre, even for a horror comedy. So I was kind of a letdown, but I rented that on I think Amazon. I'm actually just rereading, as I do every October. I'm rereading an anthology of short horror stories and Halloween memories called October Dreams. So a bunch of horror writers. It's a really great book. If you're like a Halloween person, you got to pick that up. It's awesome. And then listening, I've honestly just been, since I've been working from home, I've been plowing through my spoken word collection and also my my soundtrack collection. And what did I listen to most recently? I was listening to the soundtrack for The Believers, that Martin Sheen movie, which I've never seen. That's the last record I spun. And this is another record that I spun that actually no one ever hears about. That if you like folk music, and actually, Jim, you'd really like this. There's this band from the 60s called the Ivy League Trio. And this becomes something I play like nonstop in every autumn. They did a record with folk songs all based on Edgar Allan Poe stories. So all their songs are based off a different Poe story. It's so good. It's on YouTube. I love it. Ivy League Trio. All right, that's what I'm doing.
That's awesome.
All right, Jimmy, what have you been reading, watching, and or listening to?
So listening, I mean, not much, not really anything. And Chris, for my birthday, got me my first record player and a bunch of records. So the next time I will be listening, I'll be listening to that. I'm excited. And watching, I'll talk about two things. I just watched Invisible Man last night for the first time. I've been having a hard time watching things with the pandemic, like just disconnecting. I just have not felt like I could get into anything because everything's so horrible. So it's like one of the only movies I've watched all year, and I loved it. I mean, I'm not going to say anything that's different than anything that's out there right now, but like, I love the fresh take. I love the telling the story through the victim's perspective. I love using the story to talk about gaslighting. I love everything about it. I just thought it was really fucking awesome. It's like probably my favorite movie I've seen this year. And then we talked about this before we started. Offbeat answer here. The other thing that I've been watching is, so I couldn't cook for shit when the pandemic started, right? But like my wife and I are like uber paranoid, and we haven't gone out anywhere, and we've been making our food, and we go out like twice a week, right? Minimum. I mean, we're fucking eating fast food all the time. So we're making every single meal 3 times a day, 7 days a week. So like I've had to learn how to cook, right? And I found this guy, Jill and I, my wife Jill, we call him the Bob Ross of cooking shows, because he's like so chill, right? Like he's got like a piece of shit oven with like rusty electric grill tops, and like you open the oven and it looks like it's like 50 years old, and like his spoons are falling apart, and he's got this Louisiana accent. He's like, fancy, you just put it in a bowl, whisk it around, you got this. He's like, you never made poppers before, you can make these poppers, you got this. Like, and like like he makes me feel like, okay, I can cook this, I can do this. So Chef Buck on YouTube, I've made like 20 of his recipes. It's been very fun. It's got me through the pandemic. So yeah. And reading, I read for a living, so like this is a weird thing. Because I read all day, like I just can't like sit down and open a book. It's like feels like work. The last thing I want to do when I'm chilling out is like open a book and like start reading again. Like, you know what I mean? So it's really sort of destroyed my ability to like disconnect and lose myself in a book. I'm hoping that that's not the case forever, but so I'm not reading anything.
So when you pull out your book that you're trying to read for joy, and all of a sudden you grab your highlighter and you start.
Oh my God. Jill's grandmother used to edit books. Is like we have like books that like are highlighted and edited. Like that was like something she did. It's fascinating. I'd love
to read her Bible.
Oh my God. Oh, I gotta find that now.
I thought you were gonna give me one of those. Oh, I got an idea for a movie.
I'll email you later.
Okay.
Dude, honestly, Grandma's Bible, and it's just an edited version of the Bible, would be such a funny fucking comedy.
Dude, that would be so awesome. That'd be so awesome.
That could be a TV show.
Let's just see. The locusts don't work for me, so we're gonna just have you know, sparrows. just some minor edits. David and Goliath. Goliath wasn't that tall. He was just average. I guess for me, read, watch, and listen, I been really bad about reading for the last couple months. I feel like every episode of this podcast I do now is like, I ain't reading shit. So I ain't reading shit. I watched Hubie Halloween as well. And I guess I'll agree that fucking voice Sandler does in it is just like, please stop at this point. But like, I enjoyed the movie, and I think it's my Salem bias. And by the way, fuck you for going Salem, Chris.
I know. Hey man, I drove up there. It's crazy. I'll tell you about Salem really quickly. We went up there in September because we knew October would be too insane. But even September during the weekdays, so I can work remotely. So we went up for the week and we did like half day work. Then we go explore Salem. Dude, by the weekend, even the stores had lines to go inside because of social distancing, and rightfully so. Everyone in Salem was really respectful. We saw very few people like being like fucking dickheads without their masks or complaining about it. But like, dude, I can't fathom how that city's getting through October. It's gonna be a nightmare.
So that I've been watching the Great British Bake Off because it's the most relaxing show you can watch. It's awesome. Feel good. It's like sort of like what you're talking about watching that guy cooking on YouTube. Like it's, I bake occasionally, but like it's just relaxing, and it's also the thing where you're seeing people doing their best and being propped up to like do really good stuff. And even when they fail and they get criticism, it just doesn't feel negative.
Yeah,
it's like
awesome. Yeah.
is the one of the few positive shows that are out there is just like, man, I feel good about it. Listen to West Side Gun, Who Made the Sunshine, member of Griselda, also been thrown back to Conway the Machine, also member of Griselda since they put out a record a week at this point. Let's see, new Deftones came out called Ohms. Can't go wrong with a Deftones record at this point. There's this band called The Sect, which is, I think, the drummer of Fall Out Boy and the singer of Left 4 Dead on The Swarm. It's a really good hardcore throwback record. Another thing, and speaking of 90s, since we brought the 90s, there's this band that Nick played for me yesterday called Entropy. They're from Germany. They sound like a mix of like all the best 90s, like kind of like alternative rock, shoegaze bands. Like listening to a song, it's like, oh, it kind of sounds like God of My Voice. Now it sounds like Catherine Wheel. Now it sounds like Swerve Driver. Now it sounds like Shudder Thing. Like it covers such a vast array of like 90s rock, but like all the good parts of it, not the
That's cool.
Not the stuff that like makes you cringe about the 90s. So that's been really
All right, Nick, what have you been reading, watching, and or listening to?
All right, man. Let's see. I have been not really reading at all, even though I've been stuck in my house with tons and tons of free time. All right, yeah, I've been watching Lovecraft Country. I kind of panned it after watching the first one like an idiot, but I decided to jump back into it, and the second and third episode, I'm really enjoying it, and I kind of can't wait to get home from recording today to watch more. As far as what I've been listening to, I've been listening to New West Side Gun a ton. Who Made the Sunshine? Boom, boom, boom. It's fucking dumb. New West Side Gun. Still listening to Conway. And then I've been listening to all the Stranger Things soundtracks. The Kyle Dixon, Michael Stein from the band Survive did all those Stranger Things soundtracks, and they've done a bunch of other like just ambient synth, synthwave, whatever you want to call that kind of stuff. They've done a few other soundtracks. I think there's one called Spheres. So all that stuff's good. I've never really watched Stranger Things. I watched some of it. It's fine. I'm not gonna diss it, but the music's rad, for sure.
I've only watched 4 episodes of Stranger Things, and then
You just bailed.
It was boring, and I understand why people like it, but I also understand why people.
You don't like The Goonies or Stand By Me? You might like Stand By Me.
I like Stand By Me, but straight up fuck The Goonies.
Right on. And last but not least, and I've been listening to this a ton. I kind of just discovered it. And I think it's just one dude. That 10 Tricks Point Never. It's just like a synth guy, and it's kind of all over the place. But the one I've been listening to a ton is the Good Time soundtrack by Safdie Brothers. Good Time. They also did Uncut Gems. And yeah, it's just cool, minimal synth stuff. Super enjoyable. And that's about it for me, man.
Anyway, that wraps up this episode of the Cinematic Void Podcast. I want to thank Jimmy George and Chris LaMartina for joining us. And we'll be back in November with more episodes where we're not going to talk about Halloween. Actually, it's probably good that we're going to take a break talking about Halloween, isn't it?
Yeah, I'm getting sick of Halloween at this point.
Yeah, just
kidding.
Just kidding. You can't get sick of Halloween. Although you could get sick from eating too much candy corn.
I'm just getting ready for the Christmas episode, as I mentioned earlier.
You're like, can't wait to get back with that Garfield Christmas special.
I gotta see that Goldberg fucking movie, man.
Santa Sleigh. So yeah, you get a teaser. We'll be doing a Christmas episode too. But until then, see you in the void.
Whoop whoop. It's so funny to stereotype juggalos as you probably work at on a haunted hayride.
We gotta leave it in though.
Yeah.